And welcome to the protagonists. I'm Mike Ryan, and we've got a great panel. We're just trying to locate. Time the pub we're just trying to locate our next guest, who's just floating around somewhere. So maybe we'll have to just talk faster. Basil will have to talk for two people. He's done that before. Normally sober too. Now, there's been much talk of naval blockades in the Middle East right now, as the world's oil, gas, and other essentials for life are held up by the warring parties, all in the good cause of freedom. Not. One of the aggressors maintains a strict naval blockade on the Gaza Strip, or the Gaza Sea, controlling all maritime access to the territory. As of 2026, Israel has declared Gaza's waters a no-go zone, prohibiting Palestinian fishing, swimming and boat traffic, and regularly intercepting ships attempting to reach Gaza, which we're looking for Frank now, because he was on one of those ships. He's got frequent flyer points from the Israeli jailing system. And that's been, by the way, in place since 2007. The 2026 Global Sumud Flotilla departed from Barcelona on April 12, 2026, aiming to challenge the blockade of Gaza with over 80 boats. Israeli commandos intercepted vessels on April 29, 2026, in international waters. Others would call that piracy. We just call it Israel's form of diplomacy. Most of those captured have been released, and many were beaten up, and some were even tortured. As of May 11, participants were continuing their mission to Marmaris in Turkey. We're going to talk to our panel about the legality of this interception and what the flotilla plans to do next. And that's why we're looking for our friend Frank Romano. Frank, where are you? Meanwhile, our panel today is Basil Valentine, man about town, horse extraordinaire, not horse extraordinaire, a horse betting man extraordinaire. There you are. He's not horse, nothing horsey about Basil. He's a political analyst, broadcaster, and a regular on UK Column. And Professor Greg Simons, a geopolitical commentator, expert in media and communications. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me. Frank, we're looking for Frank, Basil, so hopefully we'll find him shortly here.
You saw me on the phone briefly there, Mike. That was Frank I was talking to, and he is hurrying to the computer terminal to log in as we speak.
Excellent.
We're talking, of course, about Dr. Frank Romano, an academic and activist who is in Marmaris, Turkey, aboard one of the vessels on the Global Humanitarian Relief Flotilla, and they had a crucial meeting this morning to decide whether or not to continue the mission to Gaza. A few volunteers have dropped out when they've seen the level of violence leveled at other participants by the Israeli military when captured. So understandably, some people think, well, I don't think this is for me, really. I don't want to get beaten up in an Israeli dungeon or worse. But others are stepping up to the plate and volunteering, and they've got about 30 vessels together. And hopefully Frank will be able to give us details of his abduction a week before last, which was pretty brutal, and can tell us about what they plan for the immediate future.
And our other guest is Greg Simons. Greg, who's often a long jaunt, obviously in the pointy end of the plane, as always. Greg Simons, tell me your thoughts just quickly on, and it's not, according to some experts, it is not illegal of what Israel is doing in the seas of Gaza. Many people would disagree with that, including myself, because what's been happening in Gaza and offshore of Gaza has been nothing short of diabolical. Greg, what's your thoughts?
Well, I mean, it's typical of these kind to try and classify and define something that is illegal with jargon, because if we remember back to the days of Bush Jr., and when they tried to redefine waterboarding as enhanced interrogation and not torture. So, I mean, you have a similar thing here. Of course it's illegal. You can't do what they are doing. And especially, I mean, the hypocrisy when you see the US and Europe bleating on about free passage in international waters and lambasting Iran for the Strait of Hormuz, and at the same time condoning what Israel is doing not only off Gaza, but what it's doing off Lebanon as well, and what it has done off the coast of Greece. So, yeah, it's just some kind of cognitive contortion that they're putting themselves through to justify something which is not really justifiable legally or morally or ethically.
I just see Frank popped in. He'll be with us shortly. What do you think, by the way, Basil?
There he is. There's Frank. Well, I mean, the whole point of the so-called ceasefire, which at the moment hangs by a thread, Donald Trump has rejected Iran's response to the ceasefire in the last 12 hours, although he hasn't really got any options but to continue it, not least because the Gulf states have all had enough. But the golden prize is reopening the Straits of Hormuz. Well, they were open before all this started. It seems like Trump's main war objective is simply now to return to the status quo before all these innocent people were slaughtered and so much death and destruction was rained not just upon Iran but also on Israel, and of course billions and billions of dollars worth of damage done to all these early warning radar bases in the Gulf states, in the potentates. So Trump, well, the Israelis certainly want more war, they tend to, and Trump is between a rock and a hard place. But I'm delighted to say I can see Frank Romano has popped up now, and perhaps he can give us the latest from one of the key front lines in the Sea of Marmaris there in Turkey.
Yes, we're having all sorts of issues at the moment because there he is. Frank, while we've got you, did you hear what Basil said to you? No, we can't actually. It's not.
Yes, I did. And I am actually.
Oh,
He's actually disappeared.
oh,
So we're back to
we're
Basil.
near and yet so far,
Yes, we know. It's one of those things. Technology does work sometimes, but at the moment it's failing to work at all. Basil, I'm just thinking about the, because this is Greg's impressed here. I'm doing some great tap dancing. Just thinking about the blockades. It seems to be two things that have sort of come to mind just recently, which governments are using to silence and get their way. I mean, one way is the sanctions they place on individuals, and the other way is the blockades, which also affects individuals having their right of free passage in international waters and stuff. We look at the US, we look at even the blockade by Iran, and now we see the blockade from Israel just off Gaza, which has been there for quite some time. Governments seem to be, Basil, whereas once upon a time there used to be almost a code of conduct to an extent, not a great code, and then they'd be sneaky and you wouldn't see it. Now they're not bashful at all in coming forward, and they're just going to do what they like. Blockades and sanctions and this sort of stuff, it doesn't augur well for the future for democracy, does it?
No, well, Western governments are extremely selective about who they choose to sanction and for what reasons, and who suffers, of course. Ursula von der Leyen, the head of the European Union, doesn't think the Iranian people have suffered enough. Her idea of asserting women's rights in Iran is to starve the people by the means of the continued economic sanctions. But on the other hand, Israel, which has, according to dozens of human rights organizations, the ICC, the ICJ, and the United Nations, committed genocide, gets a free pass. A few extremely violent settler organizations in the West Bank are now due to be sanctioned by the European Union. A really milquetoast, tokenistic move, but one that has predictably drawn a lot of fire from the Israeli government. But the key question, certainly with respect to Frank's mission and indeed international law at the moment, is that the ICC ordered Israel to allow unimpeded humanitarian aid into Gaza over 2 years ago, and it hasn't done so. And the point of Frank's mission is to highlight this fact, to highlight the fact that Israel is still starving Gaza of medicines. People are dying because they can't receive the necessary medication or treatment, malnutrition. The conditions there are absolutely hellish. It's now been divided up into 3 concentration camps on rubble. I've also seen estimates recently that as many as 380,000 people have been slaughtered. These are absolutely extraordinary numbers. And if it was nearly 400,000 Israelis had been killed, the newspapers would be screaming about a second Holocaust. But because it's Palestinians, they keep quiet. So I hope we can speak to Frank again, because his mission, although it's not enough aid to make a huge difference to the people of Gaza, nevertheless, it does at least draw attention to their plight. And the fact that the international community has so completely failed to carry out the edicts of the International Court. That's the thing, really. Israel should be forced to allow the unimpeded flow of aid into Gaza, but we all know the West is far too timid to force Israel to do anything at all. And we have to wonder whether that's because Israel's got nuclear weapons pointing at all of us.
We now have Frank, not sure for how long. Frank, greetings. I can see you have a pipe in your hand, peace pipe, of course. Oh, he's disappeared again. Isn't that great? We're just having a wow of a time. So Frank, now he's back again. This is just like, he's there, he's not there. Look at me, I've gone. Frank, we'll just try that one more time before I have no scotch. I have no scotch and I can't get out of this one. Frank, are you there? Yes. Frank, tell me, good to see your smile.
I am here. I am here.
You're here, but for how long, we don't know. Just quickly, tell us about the experience, because I just mentioned you've racked up these frequent flyer points for Israeli jails. Tell us about the treatment they gave you.
Yeah, this really, they upped the bar on treatment. This is my actually third attempt to get into Gaza, and we were intercepted very early and by the infamous Shayatet 13 commandos, and we went to their ship, and it was like a torture ship, I must say. We for 2 or 3 days we were there. They constantly flooded we were in a kind of a cattle car area. They just surrounded like a square area with cattle cars. Kind of reminded me the World War II when the Jews were taken in cattle cars to the death camps. Well, they've given us cattle cars and inundating them with water every few minutes, so they were wet. So we were sleeping on wet mats, and they took 6 of us, including Safe, and put them in solitary confinement. And we chanted and tried to get them back. They did not talk with Thiago. Thiago was trying to talk with the commander about seeing the 6 hostages that were taken in solitary confinement. And then we were beaten. Several of us were beaten. About 8 were severely injured. So like with broken ribs, broken noses, there was a concussions. So let's get to the concussion. When they finally pulled us out and forced us on the Greek boats, because we wanted to stay until our comrades, the 6 comrades, were released, and they pulled us, scraped us, and they twisted our arms and threw us on the floor. And the concussion, however, when I went to the Greek boat, I met a man who was completely delirious. He didn't know where he was. And I didn't know what he had, but I was asked by the doctor to talk with him. Little couple words at a time, and finally he was able to situate himself. It turned out later he had a serious concussion, but then there were broken noses, broken ribs, and finally that when they were forcing us on the Greek boats to take us to Crete. This, my experiences, this is the third time, it's been one of the roughest experiences with these vicious commandos since the very first time I was almost in Gaza on the Hondola.
Yeah, it's absolutely terrible. And we were very concerned about you. Take away the jocularity trying to get hold of you today. And it's a very, very terrible thing that they would do these just to, you were international.
I can't hear you for some reason.
That's what you're probably blessed.
Yeah.
My wife and Basil would say.
I can hear you now. Mike, I can hear you now. I can hear you.
Yeah. There is a delay to where Frank is. We all need to be patient. Sound does take a second or two to travel from Australia by the outer space to Frank.
Thank you. Our new head engineer is Basil Valentine. Frank, can I ask you why you keep doing this? I mean, I know it's for a magnificent cause, and we need to highlight and try and help our fellow human beings who are it's beyond all comprehension. But surely each time, Frank, you keep going back to visit your favourite jailer. Surely it gets tougher and tougher, and you have to ask yourself one day, Frank, because even at your age of 41, one day you're going to find yourself you're not going to come back. So is there something you can do other than go into the lion's mouth? Our head engineer, can you just send him a message, please? He's disappeared. So what we might do is just get Greg before he disappears. Greg, it's very, very dangerous what Frank's doing, isn't it? And he needs to be aware that each time it gets a bit rougher, and one day they're just going to forget themselves, and there'll be no more Frank Romano.
Well, I mean, this is using this punishment, unlawful, illegal, immoral, unethical, as a warning to deter others. It's trying to get people not to stand up for what is decent, what is right, etc. So this is the point that it serves, so that people do not do what is right because they're afraid of what can be done to them personally. So this is a message, a rather brutal, blunt, and disgusting message, but it can be effective. As Frank said, there are some people who left because of what happened. So this is the intention of such treatment.
Frank, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Can you just tell me, are you aware, or are you fearful for your mortality each time you go back now?
Yes, I have to admit, but each time from the Hondola on, which was not that long ago, they said after I was apprehended at the Hondola, they said, and we were in prison, we were in the immigration prison. They warned me, said one more time back here, and you'll get an automatic 3-year sentence in an Israeli prison. Well, I thought they were lying. I called their bluff, and then later, when I was involved with the Global Sumud Flotilla on the Spectre boat, I was released with everyone else. Some people have warned me, said, your time might be coming. My feeling is this, Mike, and everyone, thank you for having me on this show. My feeling is whatever the risks are, it's a necessary risk because let's not forget, right, that one of the main objectives of the Global Sumud Flotilla and the Freedom Flotilla Coalition, who have joined us with some 3 Madeleine boats, we're all together here in Turkey, is to bring back the world's attention to the struggle of the Palestinian people, in particular in Gaza. That has not changed since the Iranian conflict. In fact, as we said before, Mike, Israel enjoys these distractions because the world is focused on Iran, and in the back door they're bludgeoning Gaza, killing more people. There's an artificial ceasefire, and also in the West Bank, the settlers, with the help of the soldiers, are taking more land, killing and injuring Palestinians. So, what we are doing and what we are submitted to here, Mike, is nothing compared to Palestinians. We have to keep this in mind. And there's issues here, and there's something very important I need to share with you. And this is breaking news, really. And I can't give you all the details, but we are in a just about a half hour. We're going to have a general assembly of all the Global Sumud Flotilla people to decide whether we're going to go. There are three options: whether we go to Gaza, the other option is to stay and reorganize and go a little bit later, and the other option is simply not to go. And we've come so far, and the Gazan people are already assembling on the beaches with hope that somebody is doing something. And I'm not fanatic because I've read the documents about the risks. But when Saif said, and Saif, by the way, is to join us today, believe it or not, he said, when the impact of what are doing is greater than the risk, then we go. But if the risks are greater than the impact, then we cannot go. I just don't see it that the risks are greater than the impact of us trying to make it to Gaza. We're all hopeful to get into Gaza this time. And yeah, it's sort of to overcome the fear, Mike, sort of to address your question, is focusing on why we're here and our love for humanity and our love for Palestinians and the love for the world, because the Palestinians are unselfishly saying, yes, we want to free Palestine. And they're in the muck of Gaza. They've lost children. They lost lots of their family members living in these awful tents that are inundated with polluted water, very little food, water, and medication. They're still struggling to free Palestine, but they also say, and we're so interested in helping the world free itself from this military-industrial complex headed by Israel and the United States that's controlling the world. So they're still thinking about the world in spite of their very difficult situation.
Okay, just imagine, okay, you do go back to say, and I think you will, Frank, knowing you well enough by now, but if you go back, it's going to be way more severe than all the other times. They'll obviously beat the crap out of you. They'll put you in jail, and they could do that, though, for 3 years. Can you tell me, except for you are symbolic showing the people of Gaza that you care about them, but what else do you achieve then? If you're in jail for 3 years, or you are beaten to a pulp, what do you actually achieve? Are there other means or other ways of doing this and not going into the lion's mouth and becoming more effective? Can you do something that doesn't place your life in jeopardy?
Well, one thing is what you're doing. And I've said it many times, but it bears repeating. Without you, your people here, without you, Mike, without Basil and the other person, I can't remember, I'm sorry, your name, but you're here. Sorry?
Greg Simons.
Greg, yeah, without Greg, without you together sharing this to the world, I'll say it bluntly, what we're doing is useless, because what we're trying to do, obviously, is to kind of motivate people from moving from the discussion stage into direct action. And sort of what I had to decide for myself, I've already been on the gondola and been one trip to Gaza it was actually before the last mission of the Global Sumud Flotilla. I've retired as a lawyer, except I do represent the Palestinians before the International Court of the Criminal Court, and as volunteer on a volunteer basis. I've retired as a professor and just gone back to my original profession, which is I was a professional actor, and we're in the middle of a film being filmed in New York, and we were headed to Paris and then going to Jordan for the Palestinian scenes, since I'm banned 200 years from returning to Palestine and Israel. But I stopped because they called me to go to Malta. This was way back. Remember when the Conscious was bombed, and then I did the legal stuff after everyone left, and then Thiago told me to go to Augusta to work on the Madeleine. I was kicked off the Madeleine because they need to put a journalist on, and then I said, "You're not going to kick me off the next boat." because I'm going to buy the Hondola. So if you try kicking me off the Hondola on the way to Gaza, I'm going to put an injunction. I'm a lawyer, don't forget, and I'm going to freeze the whole damn mission. But in any case, to get back to your point, yes, there's lots of things we can do on land, especially the media work which you're doing, and it's just as important. I wouldn't say more important, because we still need to show the world that yes, we have a lot to lose for sure. We're not just hanging out, and that we have nothing else to do but to have a boat ride to Gaza and fame and all this stuff. I could not care less about. What I care about is shifting that world attention from the discussion phase to direct action. So I've stopped the film I was working on and what I'm getting around to in New York, because that's great film work, but it's indirect action, or doing on an author tour about the Palestinian resistance, on which the film was based on one of my books. I realized, but direct action, if we have an opportunity, those of us that can, we got to have some people doing it, because believe it or not you, Mike, you're the faithful person, has been right from the get-go. You and Basil have been involved in interviewing and getting the word out way back yonder when we were just talking this GSF mission. But I was told by journalists, that many journalists were not even interested in what we were doing the last mission until we were bombed in Crete. They were waiting for a bombing, So your question is very appropriate, and I have to reassess after this trip what I can do in a direct action without putting myself in harm's way. And I mean, what good am I going to do in jail? Well, I'll tell you what. You do a hunger strike, and it does attract attention, simply not to me, but if I have a lot to lose and I'm in jail after this 30-day gauntlet on the sea, and believe me, it can be a real gauntlet sometimes, then it lends credibility to what I'm doing. And if I'm willing to put myself in harm's way for the cause of the Palestinians, because I so truly believe in it, and I'm willing to, on top of that, to do a hunger strike when you're already depleted and don't have much food any on the boats, then people start thinking, well, maybe there's something to what he's saying. And so if I'm in jail for 3 years, I don't want to be in one more day in those awful Israeli jails. But if that's what it takes, and I can do the hunger strike and get attention through me, as I'm a conduit, through me to focus on the Palestinian struggle, then I'm all for it, because this doggone genocide is continuing, as you've been focusing on so much, Basil and Mike, in our own time. And just quickly, people talk very comfortably about past massacres like the Inquisition, the My Lai massacre, the Crusades, and then what Pinochet did in Chile, etc., etc. But not so much what's happening today. But we need to, because this is something we can do something about. So I'm also trying to do that. And I think if I have to go to jail to lend attention to the Palestinian struggle, using me as a conduit, then I'll do it. I have many friends there, and these are human beings anyway. They could be in Africa, and I would still fight for humanitarian principles. Hopefully, as you've said before, Mike and Basil, this is a topsy-turvy world here, where humanitarian principles seem to be thrown out the window, and we're going for the money, power, and greed, nourished by greed principles. And I think we just have to really we gotta right. We're in a nosedive. We're gonna right the plane and try all we can, and what we can do. And you're doing what you're doing. What I'm doing. I think I have to stay with the direct action anyway, Mike, as far as I know.
What do you think, Baz?
Yeah.
Well, I think Frank's very courageous, to be honest. I've no wish to visit the inside of an Israeli dungeon, not for a day, let alone 3 years. I wonder what kind of consular or embassy support Frank and his fellow Americans would receive from the United States these days, given the White House's fealty to the Israeli regime, to Benjamin Netanyahu in particular. Unfortunately, we're in a very dark place, although public opinion has turned decisively against supporting genocide. The White House and large sections of Congress are still completely captured, and with them the State Department and the offices that somebody like Frank would normally be able to rely on for some kind of consular support following his arrest and abduction, which, again, I stress the last attack on the flotilla was in international waters off Greece. It's completely outside the rule of law. Now, imagine for a moment if the Iranians or the Russians were intercepting vessels. Imagine there was vessels sailing to Ukraine, and the Russians intercepted them in international waters. We wouldn't hear the end of it. You know, there would be calls for the captains of the vessels to be arrested and immediately arraigned before the international courts and all the rest of it. Yet, from corporate media as well as from governments, when the Israelis do it, it's crickets. It's total silence because of the well-known Israeli exception.
Greg, I mean, protest and these are beyond the normal protest.
Yeah, absolutely. And go ahead.
Yep.
I'll turn off my.
No, leave it on. Leave it on. We like to hear your voice. You can butt in whenever you like. Greg, the protests have been going on for since Adam was a boy, as they would say. But this is about 4 steps further than just a protest. Do you see governments or people? I mean, I know in Australia that the only people talking about this is us. Overseas, there's Basil talks about it, Patrick talks about it, Patrick Henningsen, a few others talk about it, but it's a bit. So that's what it's like. Greg, do you think the world is ready to be woken up? Because at the moment we have probably 7.9 billion ostriches, and the heads are in the sand. Nothing reported in the media. Governments, a few words here and there, but absolutely nothing else. What do you think? What do you think will be the impact of Frank and his sailing friends, his activist friends, his ones that are bringing to light the atrocities committed? But what do you think will be the outcome of them being jailed, Greg?
Yep, I think that this shouldn't be seen in isolation from what Israel is doing to the rest of West Asia. This is part of what they are doing, which they are broadcasting themselves on TikTok and so forth. They're different war crimes, and they're proud of it. So I think one of the things which has already happened, not only concerning these flotillas, but also this genocide and ethnic cleansing in Gaza, West Bank, Lebanon, Syria, and the list goes on, is that now you are actually getting Jews, especially if we look in the US, are separating themselves from Zionism. I think this is one of the things, because Zionists like to conflate Judaism and Zionism, which, when you hear those non-Zionist Jews, they don't like this conflation because they don't see Zionism as being they see it as a political ideology and a toxic one at that. And so, but the Zionists like to align themselves with Judaism because this is a means to protect what they are doing from criticism. Because if you do...
So you're dropping out too. You must have Frank's internet.
But I think this is one of the main things. It demonstrates to the world the absolute, not only lawlessness of Israel and this Zionist regime, but also the complete lack of morality and ethics. And it exposes the lack of morality and ethics of the US government and those governments from Europe, Australia, which give them unconditional support.
Basil and Frank, and also Greg, just jump in here on this one. It's a story, an interview with 60 Minutes, and Netanyahu says the war should continue. Israel wants domination. What's your thoughts? First of all, Baz?
I thought Netanyahu looked old and ill in that 60 Minutes interview, and certainly what came out of his mouth was very old and very ill. And how he can possibly claim to have any kind of defensive posture when he's so obviously endlessly warmongering, not just because he wants to save his own skin from the corruption charges, and his time as Israel's prime minister is finally coming to an end, probably in the autumn. But also, I mean, he is really just articulating what the whole of Israeli society wants, which is endless war, endless expansion. And as Greg said, it's very difficult to see where peace in West Asia is going to come from without a sea change in what's going on inside Israel. And I saw Omer Bartov, it was, I think, this morning, saying that in order for that to happen, there has to be a change of heart in Washington. Now, Netanyahu wants to shift the US-Israeli relationship from one of client state to partnership, but the American public don't want that at all. Increasingly, they want a divorce from what another Jewish intellectual, Chaim Brashith, who served in the IDF, from what he described as a militarized vampire. That's how he described Israel. And that language is strong, but I think it's accurate. If it came from a Gentile, you might get called all sorts of names. But as a Jewish man and a former soldier in the IDF, that's now that he's seen the light, so to speak, and become an anti-Zionist, that's how he sees Israel. And for the West to be shackled to a militarized vampire is a very dark path indeed.
Frank, that interview with Netanyahu implied that he's very strong, and you can tell that Israel wants domination. Israel's behaviour to its neighbours has been absolutely appalling. Netanyahu wants the war to continue. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I did see also, apart from the interview that I heard, I did see a speech by Netanyahu and also other members of the government talking about this expansion. And this expansion is really quantified. And you see the Eretz Israel project, the Israeli project, as a real thing. It's unbelievable to some people. Oh, no, come on. They're kind of poo-pooing it. But if you look at this, speech and think about it, he on a map, he showed a map of the plan for Israeli expansion. And that plan includes a lot of Lebanon, Syria, even Jordan, and moving into the Mesopotamia Valley into Iraq. And they said, this is our right as Jews, promised this by God. And it's a true thing that people try not to focus too much on because it's unbelievable. It's actually what Netanyahu plans. But, his plan to do this is a political thing. Because as you stated, Basil, he really is kowtowing to the settler mentality. And the settler, of course, are believing in this promised land that goes way beyond the borders now of Israel, way beyond the Green Line into those countries I cited. And so he's kowtowing.
We've just lost Frank. He'll come back in about 1 second, maybe not. Greg, you can take over. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, you have Netanyahu there, and this is because, he is to an extent catering because you have a highly, what would we say, groomed society that have this ethno-supremacist, as many commentators call it, attitude towards the Palestinians, and not only the Palestinians. And if you have that, you don't have any prospect for peace for anyone. And Netanyahu seems to be on the way out. Either he's going to be politically removed or this cancer will get him. But he, to an extent, is a symptom of a deeper problem, because someone like Netanyahu surviving so long is rather an indictment on society for letting him be that long.
Basil, your thoughts, because we're just trying to get Frank back again. We've got our people running behind the scenes trying to get him. He will come back, we hope. Netanyahu, I mean, it's about time he disappeared, isn't it? I mean, I can say that quite comfortably. I think he's way overlived his. I don't think he had any usefulness at all. I think he's an abhorrent person. I think the whole regime and I think any government that supports a regime that commits these atrocities and genocide, and it's not me saying it, it's just the whole fact. So people want to jump up and down. It is a fact that Israel have committed genocide and continue to do so. Would a new leader, Basil, a new person leading the country make any difference? Is it just rearranging the deck chairs?
Yeah, deck chairs on the Titanic, I hope, Mike, because a lot of people think that Israel's internal contradictions, as well as what we hope will be increasing pressure from outside countries to put sanctions on it to change its behavior, may cause the whole Zionist project to collapse in the not too distant future. Because if you ask me, it's brought nothing but death, destruction and suffering to the region. People talk about this troubled region all the time. It wasn't terribly troubled before the Zionists arrived. There were Muslims, Christians and Jewish people living perfectly peaceably in historic Palestine in the 19th century under the Ottoman Empire and in the early part of the 20th century. It was only when the Zionists arrived with their ideology of supremacism and domination, and the land belonged to them and only them, that the problem started. And then they very successfully, over the last 50 years, managed to frame any resistance to their violence as terrorism. And of course, this catch-all term terrorism immediately means that anybody associated with it is, demonized. And I mean, even Frank, believe it or not, I saw an Israeli Hasbara, that's their propaganda arm, individual posting on Instagram to say that Tiago and Saif, who were detained by the Israelis in Israel for about 10 days after their capture the week before last, that they were terrorist supporters, that they're Hamas supporters, and I've no doubt there are people that would label Frank as a terrorist sympathizer, as being terrorist adjacent, so to speak, because he's bringing, aid to the beleaguered people of Gaza. I mean, it's really inverted. It's really very sinister to frame people on humanitarian missions as having anything to do with terrorism. But in answer to your question, no.
Yeah, can I add to that, Basil, when you get a chance? Yeah.
Go on, please do, Frank.
No, but just to add to what you're saying, when I got off and I was deported after being so close, 50 nautical miles with the Hondola, I returned to France. There's a group called Brigade Juif, which means Jewish Brigade, who not only labeled me a terrorist, but they also threatened. They gave me a death threat, and of course we've all received them. And it's become common that and just to add what you're saying, any
We are having trouble, Frank. You've just frozen. He's
frozen there.
Basil,
What a shame.
Keep going, Basil. We need you to talk quickly.
Yeah, well, Netanyahu belongs in a jail cell. It's as simple as that. I mean, his political career might be coming to an end, but hopefully it's not the end of his place in public life, because he's due to appear before the International Criminal Court. Mehdi Hassan spoke to Karim Khan of the ICC, the chief prosecutor, and asked him why he hadn't brought genocide charges against Netanyahu. And he said, well, basically he said, they're coming, they're in the pipeline. So I sincerely hope and believe that we see justice, because you can't have lasting peace without justice. And, I find it rather distressing that him and people like him continue to be paraded on American television as if they're respectable politicians. They're not. He's a mass murderer, a war criminal of the very worst kind. And I think it's just.
So I have to leave now. So let's continue this, please. Thank you.
That's and there's Frank Romano.
Safe is back
Yes.
here.
Okay.
Back to you, Baz. I'm pushing every button possible here and doing it fairly well too. Sorry.
Well, that's live. That's live television. That's live reporting for you, Mike. And yeah, the safe that Frank is referring to there, of course, is one of the leaders who was he's a Spanish national actually, and he's joining them there for obviously their big meeting about deciding whether to proceed or not. But to finish the point, no, Netanyahu, when he finally goes, I'm afraid to say the person who replaces him will pursue almost identical policies. That's the tragedy of the situation.
Greg, just the fact that Netanyahu would like this to continue probably indefinitely, that doesn't augur well for the future of the Middle East. The atrocities that they're committing against Lebanon and other of their neighbours, other neighbouring nations. What do you think about? Do you think if Netanyahu was replaced, do you think it's just same tune, different band, or do you think maybe there is a chance of some sort of reconciliation and some sort of decency that might come to the parties here and create some sort of maybe we have a semblance of humanity, or do you think, as Basil thinks, same tune, different band, and we continue on doing what we're doing? It can't go on forever, though, can it?
Well, I mean, I agree with Basil. Netanyahu is a symptom of a deeper problem. And when you get an exception, they get murdered. So you had I've forgotten his name, former Prime Minister, who went with the two-state solution, and his fate wasn't ending well. But yeah, absolutely right. It's not sustainable because they rely on other people to finance and support their ethno-supremacism, whether it's the military or the financial support, as well as diplomatic and political support. And now you're getting a huge gap between the American public and the European public and those mainstream political establishment, which are getting increasingly isolated by this unconditional support. So in this regard, also to factor in the fact that, I mean, the West is deindustrializing and in terminal decline. So there is a definite expiry date on this. When it happens exactly, this is to be determined. But it's closing in around them, which is why I think they're making this push, because this greater Israel idea, it's been accelerated. It's not only an issue about Netanyahu's vanity and so forth, and his personality, narcissism without limits. That's part of it, but also the fact that they realize the window to achieve this is about to disappear.
Baz, have you? You're a geopolitical commentator. You observe very well, and you take note of what's happening around the world. It seems to be on this march towards, like lemmings over a cliff, but over the cliff is this perpetual war, and you can't have perpetual wars, especially if you've got nukes and great big weapons. Where do we go? How do we put a bit of a halt on? I mean, look at the EU. Look at Germany, wants to be the strongest, biggest, best army by 2039. And if you look at, Germans are saying to compare that to the official start of the Second World War, is an insult, but there is a similarity. Germany had a very strong military. Can you tell me why would Germany and why do these other nations around the world want to have the biggest and the best military unless it's to conquer the rest of the world?
Well, the world is infected, or rather, I should say, political elites and the oligarchy is infected by a sort of bellicose groupthink, which doesn't really have any basis in reality. Vladimir Putin has no intention of invading Western Europe. He's no more likely to do that than turn up at my door dressed as Father Christmas one day, So the entire political class needs sweeping away in just about every major democracy, with the possible exception of Spain, whose leader, Pedro Sanchez, at least has the gumption to stand up to the Israelis. But as for the rest of them, well, the United States, the United Kingdom, the European Union, Germany, leaders are all in place because they've been a combination of the four Bs, Mike: brainwashed, bullied, blackmailed, and bribed into supporting Israel and into supporting this insane war agenda, with Vladimir Putin inflated and exaggerated to be the next Adolf Hitler, and arrant nonsense about reviving economies through military spending, even though military spending has the lowest knock-on beneficial effects of any kind of government spending. The so-called multiplier effect is least effective with military spending. If you put money in the pockets of poor people, or if you spend it on roads, hospitals, schools, tax cuts for entrepreneurs, all these things produce far more jobs than military spending. So from an economic point of view, it's disastrous. From a global stability point of view, it's disastrous. Where the kernel of this idiocy lies, I'm not quite sure. I spent my time at today's news talk asking an endless series of people where this enmity towards Russia stems from. We had the peace dividend in the 1990s, if you can remember, after the fall of the Berlin Wall and the collapse of communism. We were all supposed to get along, and for a while we did. And then something turned. It was 9/11, of course, which was a bucket of poison in the wellspring of humanity. And thereafter, we've had endless campaigns of fear-mongering from governments against their own populations, authoritarianism, wars and rumors of wars, and the whole political class is completely complicit in this. It looks like we're going to get rid of that idiot Starmer this week in Britain, but as Craig Murray pointed out in an excellent article on his Substack column yesterday, Zionism has infected the central nervous system of British politics, as it has in Australia and the United States, and only avowed Zionists are allowed to get anywhere near power. Even Jeremy Corbyn, who isn't actually an anti-Zionist, I don't think he's ever said that Israel needs to be dismantled. He's still on the old two-state solution train, But even his, support for Palestinian human rights saw him smeared as an anti-Semite and politically assassinated, though he was allowed to carry on with the rest of his life. Craig says in this article that he thinks only revolutionary change now will bring about the, what's needed, because politicians no longer represent people, but they're maintained in power through a corporate media that continues to amplify their voices and dismiss all alternatives and independence. Now, there are stirrings in Britain and in America. People have had enough. They are waking up to the fact that their lives are run by people who don't care for them and have absolutely insane psychotic agendas. But it's happening only slowly. We can all, though, live in hope, Mike, that things will get better.
No, they won't. But they won't. I mean, it's that light at the end of the tunnel is a big steaming locomotive getting faster and faster That's my humble opinion. Greg, if Netanyahu or Bibi has this propensity to never-ending wars, how do you see the Middle East faring over the, say, just to pick a time, say 10 years? Gets worse or does it get better?
I think one of the big deciding factors in this is going to be the final outcome of the war against Iran, because this has not gone according to plan. In fact, this is contrary to plans. And I think that the result of the US humiliation, as Mertz put it, and the defeat of Israel, they were not able to achieve their goals, any of them. This is going to mean increasing problems with them. And you can see the Gulf states, most of them, with the exception of the UAE, are distancing themselves from the US and Israel. It's only, in this case, the UAE, which at this stage has not done so for whatever reason that might be. So connected to this, also, I mean, they haven't quelled the resistance in Gaza, and they're getting the backsides handed to them in southern Lebanon by Hezbollah. So they're going through treasure and they're going through blood at an unsustainable rate. So even if they do want their perpetual wars, I mean, they won't be able to support them, not with the blood or the treasure that they're currently losing.
And Basil, you have the final say.
Well, I'm sorry to hear you don't think things are going to get better, Mike. We must live. We must live in hope. It's always darkest before the dawn, they say, and let's hope that the dawn is only a few minutes away.
I suppose there is light for you guys if Starmer disappears. It's just who do
It's
you
just,
get?
I mean, you never know that whoever replaces him won't be worse, but at least he's gone. At least he will have gone, you know. And I've long since suspected he's an asset of the United Kingdom national security state. So they'll be scurrying around now in Whitehall, you know. MI5 will be saying, "Who can we trust? Who's our man out of the remaining, out of the rabble of this Labour government?" Some people are saying there might be a general election, but I very much doubt it, because Labour MPs are all going to want to hang on to their seats and their salaries for as long as possible.
And you were once Labor too. I heard all sorts of good things about you. Good to see you've changed, Basil. You must be, actually, being an ex-Labor person, you must be appalled at how the current government is behaving.
Yeah, I mean, the current iteration of the Labour Party bears no resemblance whatsoever. And I mean, Starmer said so himself to the one of 2019 under Jeremy Corbyn. He said, "The Labour, no, that voice is far too strong." He's got a terribly weak, robotic voice. In fact, I saw people saying last week that AI has more charm and charisma than Keir Starmer, and that's true. He's like a bad robot, but the warmongering, ultra-Zionist, neoliberal, authoritarian political party he's put together, which believes in power for its own sake, is utterly rootless. But it came out last week after the party tanked in the local elections that one of the reasons it did so badly was that people felt that it didn't have any guiding principles at all. And that's true, there aren't any. There's certainly not universal human rights or, you know, improving the living standards of ordinary people. They quite obviously couldn't care less about either of those things. So therefore people say, well, what on earth does this political party stand for? And the answer is, the only thing it stands for are the careers of the individuals at the top. That's it, period. It's only about the individuals getting paid high salaries for as long as they can, and then disappearing into the House of Lords and getting paid for turning up there every day, or getting these non-executive directorships, whatever company will take them on, so they've got their name on their letterhead when they leave the House of Commons. That's it. End of story. There's no other purpose to the government.
And you heard it right here with Basil Valentine. Basil, If somebody wants to find out more about you, of course, UK column. When are you on next on UK column?
I'll be on there on Friday at 1 p.m. UK time.
UK time with Patrick, maybe?
Yep, with Patrick Henningsen. Yeah.
007. And Greg Simons, if somebody wants to find out more about you, how do they do that?
I'm around on ResearchGate, where I upload quite a bit of my stuff. I'm writing from time to time for Propaganda in Focus, so I've got a bunch of different things there. And yeah, I mean, I'm different places which are not mainstream due to its toxicity to the mainstream.
Thank you so much. Enjoy your flight too. Hope we haven't made you miss your plane. Basil Valentine and Greg Simons, Professor Greg Simons, and Dr. Frank Romano, who sort of popped in and disappeared, and then just disappeared. Thank you so much for your time. This has been The Protagonist. We got through it. The only thing that hasn't happened is the seat explode. That might happen down the track. You never know. This has been The Protagonist on The World Today. We'll catch you again tomorrow. Be kind, drive safely, look after your neighbours, and catch Basil Valentine on Friday at UK column. Thank you so much. This is Protagonist.